Mary sat on the edge of the bed in a flat where silence throbbed louder than any scream. The walls, covered in pale wallpaper, felt cramped like a coffin, and the air was so thick it seemed like it could be cut with a knife. Outside, bare tree branches rustled, and in their creaking was something that sounded like a groan, strained, fragile, human. Her hands rested on her knees, fingers involuntarily clutching the fabric of her pants. A faint impression of a ring still lingered on the ring finger of her left hand, though the actual ring had long since gathered dust in a drawer. The room carried a scent, not of her perfume, not of coffee, not of dust. Another, the one that lingered from her child, the scent of chamomile shampoo, of the blanket that covered him at night, of his little body that had never known sin. He was gone, only 2 years of life, and vanished. Without warning, without mercy, without a chance. In the hospital, they said, sudden cardiac arrest in his sleep. Words that have no taste, no shape, no meaning. They explain nothing, they only take. After the funeral, Mary drifted like a shadow. Her husband was silent, then he started drinking, then shouting, then he simply left. Her mother said she was still young. Her friend said she was strong and holding on. But Mary didn't want to hold on. She wanted to fall apart, to become ashes, to become nothing. So she packed a few things. A warm sweater, several pairs of socks, her passport, a photo of her son, the only one she couldn't bring herself to burn. And she left, bought a one-way ticket to a small town in Slovenia, tucked among the Julian Alps. She didn't care about landscapes. She didn't care for architecture, culture, or language. She cared only for silence. The kind that doesn't cut or strangle, but simply is. The town was called Kranjska Gora. The mountains loomed like silent giants that had seen death, love, eternity, and spoke not a word of it. There were few tourists, especially in March. Patches of snow still clung to the ground, and the air smelled of cold and pine resin. Mary rented a wooden house on the outskirts, modest, old, but with a fireplace. The landlady, an elderly woman, asked no questions. She simply handed her a cup of tea with honey. In the first days, Mary barely stepped outside. She sat wrapped in a blanket, listened to the firewood crackling in the hearth, and stared at the flames. When the fire died down, she felt something inside her dimming too. But she would add more logs. Light it again. One day, she stepped outside, without purpose. And she saw a track in the snow. A small paw, a squirrel's or a marten's. And next to it, a child's footprint, as if someone had walked barefoot. A chill gripped her. Was it a hallucination? A memory? Her son had loved running barefoot, even on cold floors. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the track was gone. But something inside her had stirred. A few days later, she hiked up to Lake Jasna, 2 mirrors nestled among the mountains. The water was painfully clear, like the eyes of a stranger. She stood there for a long time, watching her reflection ripple on the surface. For the first time in many months, she cried, not in agony, not from rage. Just quietly, without sobs. That evening, she wrote only 2 words in her notebook, I am. It was a beginning. The months crept by slowly. Spring arrived, touching pine needles, flowers, even hearts, with careful fingers. Mary began going out more often, walking through the forest, listening to birds. Sometimes she brought the photo of her son. She talked to him, like to someone living, like to a spirit, like to a part of herself. One day in the woods, she met a girl, a local, with a red backpack. The child had lost her way and was crying. Mary led her back to the village, silently, without asking her name. But at the end, the girl looked at her with an odd clarity that pierced through. Something cracked in Mary's chest from that gaze. And through the crack, for the first time, light entered. The landlady invited her. One day into her workshop. There were wooden toys, old, but beautiful. Mary ran her fingers over a duck carved from ash wood. It turned out, the woman's husband had made them, a man who had died 10 years earlier. She preserved his memory through the objects he had created, a memory that didn't tear but held. For the first time since her loss, Mary wondered, what if her pain was not only poison, but also paint? Not only a wound, but a tool. She began to draw, on pieces of wood, on paper. She drew her son. Not his portrait, but his trace, his shadow, his warmth. And at some point, she realized she was focusing instead of weeping. One morning, she stepped outside and felt. Her chest wasn't empty. Not full. Not yet. But not empty anymore. So she climbed higher, up to the summit of Mount Versick. Alone. No plan. With the photo in her pocket. It was cold, the sky the color of ivory. She climbed, breathing heavily, stumbling. And at some point, she fell. Blood streamed from her knees. She sat on the rocks, trembling, not from pain, but from the scream. A scream that tore from within. The echo responded, then vanished. She waited for an answer. But none came. And then she said to herself, silently, over and over again, he will not return. But she is alive, and she will find a way to breathe. She stood. Blood dripped from her scraped knees. But her steps were firm. She descended the mountain a different person. Not healed, not light, but not empty either. When she returned, she opened the window. Let fresh air in. Boiled tea. Sat at the table, and for the first time in a long while, wrote a long letter. Not to someone, but to herself. The one she was before the loss. The one who died with her son. And the one who was just now reborn. Life hadn't become easier, but it had become possible. And when the first flower bloomed outside her house in spring, she smiled. Without pain, without guilt, just smiled.